Waitress, cursed in Italian, under her breath. The mafia boss leaned closer. Say that again. Slowly. The air at La Pietra was thick with garlic, old money, and the unspoken tension of a Saturday night in Greyhaven. It was 10 minutes past midnight, marking the 14th hour of Mara Ellison's double shift. At 26, she felt closer to 50. The marble floors of the restaurant gleamed under the opulent, low-hanging chandeliers, reflecting the exhaustion back at her. Greyhaven, New Jersey, a port city that smelled of salt and rust, demanded everything and gave back scraps. La Pietra was its polished veneer, a place where the city's powerful came to eat, and Mara was just part of the machinery. She was balancing a heavy silver tray, loaded with the dregs of Table 9-3 empty glasses, a smeared plate, and one full, tragically expensive glass of Barolo. Her foot caught on the intricate inlay of the flooring, just a slight hesitation, but it was enough. Her ankle twisted, the tray tipped. Time slowed. She saw the glass of Barolo lift, hang suspended, and then arc downwards. It shattered on the marble with a sound like a pistol shot in the suddenly quiet dining room. Deep crimson, the color of arterial blood, spread across the white stone like a stain. A collective gasp. Mara squeezed her eyes shut, a hot flush of humiliation creeping up her neck. The manager, Bissett, was already halfway across the room, his face puce. Accidenti, Mara hissed under her breath, the word slipping out before she could stop it. A relic from her grandmother. Santo Cielo. It was meant for her alone, a private frustration in a language no one here spoke. Say that again. The voice was not Bisset's. It was low, gravelly, and dangerously close. It cut through the silence like velvet-wrapped steel. Mara's eyes snapped open. A man was standing over her. He had risen from the VIP booth, the one tucked into the alcove, the one everyone knew to leave alone. He leaned down, not to help, but to hear. Slowly, he commanded. This was Dario Valenzi. She did not know the name, but she knew the type. 34, perhaps, with a face that looked carved from the same hard marble she was kneeling on. His suit was midnight black. Perfect, fitting shoulders that implied strength, not just wealth. He was the silent leader of the Valenzi consortium, though Mara only knew him as the shadow who commanded the best table and inspired the most fear. He was not alone. 3 other men, also in dark suits, stood partially, their chairs scraped back. They were not looking at Mara or the spilled wine. Their eyes were scanning the room, checking exits, assessing threats, measuring the angles. Ellison Bissett finally arrived. Skidding to a stop, his voice was a nasal shriek. Look at this, a $90 bottle of wine that's coming out of your pay. Do you hear me, you clumsy? Dario Valenzi raised a single hand, palm flat, without looking at the manager. Bissett stopped talking. He stopped so abruptly it was as if his air supply had been cut. Dario's gaze remained locked on Mara. He reached into his jacket, retrieved a slim, black leather wallet, and tossed 2 pristine $100 bills onto the wet marble beside the broken glass. That covers the bottle, and the inconvenience to the other guests, he said. His voice, though quiet, reached every corner. The entire dining room was frozen, forks halfway to mouths, and bring my table another. Bissett, pale and sweating, just nodded, scooping up the money and scurrying away. The silence in the restaurant was heavier now, absolute. Mara was still on her knees, the sting of Bissett's words fading, replaced by the intense, analytical pressure of Valenzi's stare. She tried to hide the tremor in her hands as she began picking up the larger shards of glass. What is your name? He asked. Mara, she whispered, her voice tight. Mara Ellison. Mara? He tasted the name, as if checking its weight. You will finish cleaning this. Then you will serve only my table for the remainder of the night. It was not a request. It was a transfer of ownership. She nodded, unable to find the words to refuse or even to agree. He straightened up, turned, and returned to his booth, the three shadows settling back into place around him. 10 minutes later, Mara, having composed herself in the staff bathroom, went to the bar to retrieve the fresh bottle of Barolo for the VIP table. As she waited for the bartender, one of Valenzi's men, the youngest, with restless eyes approached the bar beside her. "Boss usually likes blondes," the man murmured, leaning into her space, his cologne suffocating. He let his fingers brush the bare skin of her arm, just above the elbow, but I guess he's making an exception. Mara froze, her skin crawling. She did not have to pull away. From across the room, at the booth, there was no sound, no shout, there was only a look. Dario Valenzi had lifted his head, his dark eyes fixed on his man. It was a look of profound, chilling disappointment. The underling's hand snapped back as if he had touched a hot stove. The blood drained from his face. "My apologies. Miss," he stammered, backing away from the bar and returning to the table, where he sat rigid, staring straight ahead. When Mara delivered the wine, her hands were steady. Dario dismissed her with a slight dip of his chin. It was an hour later, as the restaurant finally emptied, that the adrenaline truly faded, leaving a familiar, aching loss. She reached for the thin silver chain around her neck. Her fingers fumbled against her collarbone. Nothing. The charm, her mother's charm, an old, worn coin, small and smooth, was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She scanned the floor around the service station, desperation rising. It was all she had left. Looking for this? Dario Valenzi was standing beside her. She had not heard him approach. He held his hand open. Resting in his palm was the small, silver coin charm. He must have seen it on the floor when he'd first leaned over her. She breathed, reaching. He closed his hand. "Turn around." She hesitated, confused. "What?" "Turn around," he repeated, his voice softer now, but no less firm. She turned, her back to him. She felt the brush of his fingers against the nape of her neck as he moved her hair aside. The air chilled where his skin almost touched hers. He was unnervingly gentle. He navigated the broken clasp, his knuckles grazing her vertebrae, and secured the charm. The metal felt cold against her warm skin. He did not step away. He leaned in, his lips near her ear. "Protegitioce è prezioso," he whispered. Mara shivered, and it had nothing to do with the cold. At 2:30 in the morning, she pushed through the kitchen's back door into the damp, foggy alley. The shift was over. Her feet were screaming. The last bus, the number 12, had stopped running an hour ago. It was a 4-mile walk home. A black sedan sat idling at the mouth of the alley, its headlights cutting precise cones into the mist. It was sleek, expensive, and utterly silent. The back window lowered. Dario Valenzi looked out. "The bus line has stopped," he stated. It was not a guess. Mara stopped, clutching the thin strap of her bag. "I will take you home." She looked from the car back down the dark, empty street. Every instinct told her to run, to say no, to refuse the ride from the man who commanded shadows and silenced rooms with a look. But she was so very tired. She hesitated, but in that moment, it was not fear that held her. It was curiosity, a dangerous, compelling curiosity about the man who spoke her grandmother's language, who returned lost things, and who looked at her as if he already knew her. Mara Ellison walked forward and opened the car door. She slid onto the plush leather seat. The door closed behind her with a heavy, final sound. The car pulled away from the curb, gliding silently past the misty docks of Greyhaven, carrying her into a world from which she knew, deep down, most people never returned. The black sedan was a sensory deprivation tank. It moved through the city with a heavy, soundless grace, the thick, armor-plated glass turning the wail of distant sirens into a dull rumor. The air inside smelled only of clean leather and the cold metallic trace of the harbor. Mara stared at the fog as it swirled around the streetlights, turning Greyhaven into a landscape of ghosts. Abruzzo. Dario Valenzi did not ask. He stated it. his voice quiet, pulling her from her thoughts. "What?" Mara turned, her reflection a pale oval in the dark window. "The dialect accidenti. It is not the clean Italian they teach in schools. It is mountain talk, from the rocks. Why do you know it?" She looked down at the hands clenched in her lap. "My nonna, she was from Abruzzo. She raised me, mostly. Said she taught me how to curse before she taught me how to pray." He picked up on the past tense instantly. "She passed 3 years ago. My mother—" Mara's throat closed. The grief was still raw, sharp-edged. "My mother was a nurse, right here in Greyhaven. She just died, 6 weeks ago. The medical bills." She stopped, biting the inside of her cheek. She would not cry in front of this man. She would not show him that weakness. She expected indifference, a polite nod. What she got was stillness. When she risked a glance, the analytical coldness in his eyes had receded, replaced by a momentary, startling flicker of depth, almost like recognition. He looked away, his jaw tightening as he stared at the concrete and steel of the skyline. "Greyhaven isn't kind to decent people," he said, the observation flat, final. The car slowed, pulling up to her crumbling brick apartment building, a place that always smelled of damp and boiled cabbage. Before she could reach for the handle, he stopped her. He held out a business card. It was not paper. It felt like thin, pressed linen, matte black. Embossed in charcoal gray was a single, 10-digit telephone number and nothing else. "When you need to be safe, call this," he said. "Safe from what?" "From everything else." She took the card. His fingers did not graze hers, but she felt the warmth from his hand all the same. She got out. The door shut with a heavy, vacuum-sealed thump. The sedan pulled away, its red taillights swallowed by the fog before she had the key in her apartment lock. The 6:30 morning alarm felt like a slap. Mara traded her black waitress uniform for the beige apron of Anchor and Almonds, the small, bright cafe where she worked her day shift. The smell of roasted coffee and cardamom was a comfort, but it could not mask her exhaustion. Priya, the cafe's manager and perhaps Mara's only friend, slid a cranberry scone onto the counter. "You look like you've been hit by a truck." "Mara, La Pietra again." "It was La Pietra," Mara murmured, her hands moving on autopilot, tamping espresso, steaming milk. The rhythmic whump hiss of the machine was the soundtrack to her life. "You can't keep working 20-hour days. You're running on fumes, honey," Priya said, her voice soft with genuine concern. "Fumes are all I can afford," Mara replied, nodding toward the small back office, where a stack of envelopes sat on the desk. 2 were bright red with final notice stamped on them, rent, the looming balance of her student loans, and now, the mountain of hospital debt. A group of dock workers huddled in their usual booth, their voices low and rough over the morning chatter. "The Pier 9 is locked down tight," one said, stirring his coffee. "It's the Rooks," another muttered, his eyes darting around the cafe. "The Rooks Syndicate. This ain't like the old days. They don't just break legs. They're smart. Messing with shipping manifests, making whole containers accidentally fall into the bay. It's clean, but it's vicious." Mara felt a cold knot in her stomach. Pier 9 was Valenzi territory, or so the city's whispers went. The lunch rush was a blur of sandwiches and frantic orders. Around 1 o'clock, a man in a nondescript gray suit, too clean for the neighborhood but too cheap for the financial district, ordered a black coffee. He paid with a precise $20 bill and left. When Mara went to clear the cup, she found a thick, cream-colored envelope tucked under the sugar packets. Her name was written on the front in a sharp, assertive script, Mara Ellison. She opened it in the stockroom, leaning against bags of flour. Inside was a heavy, embossed invitation. The Greyhaven Children's Relief Fund requested the pleasure of her company at its annual auction, Saturday night at the Lumiere Spire, the city's most exclusive hotel, built into the bones of an old lighthouse. Tucked behind the invitation was a small, stiff card. A single sentence was written on it in bold, blue ink. Wear amber. Priya found her staring at it. Oh, Mara, no, this is not your world. It's from him, isn't it, Valenci? The Children's Relief is his organization, his mother's legacy. He's protective of it. But listen. Priya grasped her arm. Valenci is rich, but he's not a saint. People are whispering about the IIC, the Interstate Integrity Commission. They're quietly investigating shell companies all over the harbor. If a man like Dario Valenci is inviting you to a ball, he doesn't just want to dance. Mara's first instinct was to throw the invitation in the trash. It was absurd, a charity ball. She was a waitress, drowning in debt, not a character in a fairy tale. She went home that night, tossed the invitation on her scarred kitchen table, and opened her mail. It was there, the final, itemized bill from the hospital for her mother's end-of-life care. The number was obscene. It was more than she made in a year at both jobs. It was a concrete block, and it was tied to her feet. She stared at the total, her breathing shallow, the paper shaking in her hand. She thought of her mother's exhausted smile, of the system that charged $300 for an aspirin. She thought of her own grinding, endless exhaustion. And she thought of Dario Valenci. She picked up the heavy invitation. She wasn't going for the lights or the charity. She was going for answers. She was going to stand in front of him and ask why. Why her? Why the charm? What, exactly, did he know about her? The night before the event, a large, flat, unmarked box appeared outside her apartment door. There was no delivery slip, no note. Inside, resting on a bed of black tissue paper, was a dress. It was the color of amber, a deep, fiery gold. The silk was heavy, fluid, and cut with a severe, almost minimalist elegance. Beneath it, a pair of simple black heels, exactly her size. It was not a gift, it was a summons. Her phone vibrated on the table. A text from the unknown number. The number from the black card. The color matches your eyes when you defied me. Her fingers were shaking, but this time it was with anger. She typed back a simple, blunt response. What do you want? The reply came almost instantly. The truth and a dance. The Lumiere spire was not a hotel. It was a tower of glass and light, stabbing defiance into the perpetually gray sky of the harbor. The original 19th century lighthouse was its core, now encased in a modern, crystalline structure that glittered with the wealth of Greyhaven's elite. Valets in dark gray uniforms took cars that were worth more than Mara's entire family had ever earned in a lifetime. She had arrived in a simple black taxi, paid for with her last $20, the amber dress feeling like a costume or armor. It fit perfectly, a fact that disturbed her more than the opulence. He was waiting just inside the lobby, standing apart from the clusters of laughing, jeweled guests. Dario Valenci in a tuxedo was a different creature. The power, usually leashed beneath a veneer of quiet business, was now amplified, a physical presence in the room. His smile, when he saw her, was thin and sharp, less a welcome than an assessment, a blade's edge. "Mara," he said, his voice a low anchor in the sea of high-pitched chatter. He offered his arm. When she took it, a current, small and electric, passed between them. The fabric of his suit was impossibly fine. As they walked into the main ballroom, the crowd did not so much part as shift, creating a path for him, a ripple of deference and fear. "Dario, darling." A woman dripping in diamonds paused him. "Who is your lovely friend?" Dario's hand covered Mara's on his arm, a brief, possessive pressure. "This is Mara Ellison, my new customer service consultant. She is invaluable." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it slid right over the woman's suspicion, but the whispers had already begun. "Who is she?" Ellison never heard of them. Consultant, is that what they call it? Now Mara kept her chin high, her posture straight, channeling every ounce of her nonna's mountain stubbornness. A woman with a severe black bob and eyes like polished obsidian detached herself from a conversation with a senator and approached them. She was not smiling. "Dario, a word." She glanced at Mara, and the assessment in that look was cold, precise, and deeply unnerving. "You are new." "Elena Voss, my chief legal counsel," Dario introduced them. "Elena, this is Mara." Elena Voss gave a curt nod, her gaze lingering on Mara. "A word of advice, Miss Ellison," she said, her voice as clipped as her hair. "Greyhaven has no mercy for honest people. Be careful which one you pretend to be." She turned and walked away, leaving a chill in her wake. "She seems protective," Mara murmured. "She is paid to be," Dario replied, guiding her toward the bar. Across the room, near the grand staircase, Mara saw a man who did not fit. He was thick-set, his tuxedo straining across his shoulders, his face weathered. He was laughing too loudly with a group of men Mara recognized from the docks, the Rooks. "Who is that?" she asked quietly. Dario's gaze followed hers. His face did not change, but she felt the muscles in his arm tense. "Arturo Bale. He manages Pier 9 for me. He seems friendly with the Rooks." "He does." Arturo clapped one of the Rook leaders on the back, a gesture too familiar, too comfortable. The handshake that followed lasted just a second too long, a fraction of a second where something might have been passed. Dario's eyes narrowed, a subtle, almost invisible shift, but Mara saw it. She saw the tightening of his jaw, the way his focus sharpened to a single point on his own man. The main event, the auction, was starting. Mara, feeling overwhelmed, drifted away from Dario's side while he was cornered by the mayor. She moved toward the display of auction items, trying to look like she belonged. There was a gaudy diamond necklace, a trip to Tuscany, and an old oil painting of Greyhaven's harbor from a century ago. She leaned in to look at the brushstrokes, and a voice from behind a nearby velvet curtain caught her ear. A man's voice, low and urgent. "Ye don't care what you heard. The IEC hits Pier 9 next week, not this one." Mara froze. It was the councilman who had been speaking with Elena's senator. "Just make sure the manifests are clean by then." The voice continued, muffled. "I'm sticking my neck out for this. I expect my cut to be thick enough to be worth it. Yes. After the raid, it looks cleaner that way." The curtain twitched, and Mara moved away, her heart pounding a heavy, sick rhythm. A corrupt councilman, a warning. She needed to tell Dario. She found him on the grand terrace, a wide expanse of stone overlooking the dark, churning water of the harbor. The wind whipped her hair across her face and smelled of salt and cold rain. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, standing by the stone balustrade. "I think I just heard one," she said, her voice shaking slightly. She told him what the councilman said. He listened, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon. He did not seem surprised. "I hate liars, Mara," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But my profession is full of them. It's a disease. It infects everyone." He turned to her, the light from the ballroom carving his face into planes of shadow and light. "I find myself needing a mirror, someone to remind me what the truth looks like, before I slip too far." "And you think that's me?" she asked, incredulous. "The waitress. You're the only person in this building who hasn't lied to me tonight." He was standing closer now. The wind was loud, but not loud enough to cover the sudden, high-pitched whine. A tiny red light appeared over the water, moving fast. "A drone," he said, his body tensing. Before she could process, his reaction was instantaneous. He grabbed her arm, not gently, and pulled her hard against him. His other arm came up to cover the side of her head, his body twisting to shield her, angling her face into the dark wool of his tuxedo. "Don't look up," he commanded, his voice in her hair. She was pressed against him, her hands flat on the solid wall of his chest. His heart beat under her palm, a slow, powerful, steady rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. It was the calmest thing in the whole chaotic night. He smelled of wool, clean air and something metallic. He held her there, a solid, immovable object, until the red light of the drone blinked and zipped away into the darkness. He let her go, but his hands lingered on her arms, steadying her. "You are not safe here." They walked back inside, the warmth and noise of the ballroom hitting them like a physical wall. The main auctioneer was on stage, laughing. Suddenly, the massive screens on either side of the stage, meant to display the auction items, flickered. They went black. Then they snapped on, showing grainy, black and white footage, a warehouse, men moving boxes. An electronically distorted voice filled the room. "We ask, where does the money for the Greyhaven Children's Relief really go? We ask, what is the Valenzi Consortium really shipping from Pier 9? The video switched to a complex, unreadable ledger. "We ask," the voice boomed, "why funds donated for sick children are being washed through offshore accounts." The ballroom erupted. Gasps turned to frantic, angry murmurs. People turned, as one, to stare at Dario Valenzi. It was a setup, a public execution. Dario stood perfectly, devastatingly still. His face was a mask of cold calm. He looked not at the screens, but at the crowd, at the exits, at the faces of his enemies. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear, his words for her alone, a private, intimate conspiracy in the middle of a war. "Someone wants to make me the man who betrays children," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. "A desperate move. They will have to show their face to finish it. Watch them." The high-pitched shriek of a fire alarm split the air, drowning the orchestral music and the panicked shouts. Strobes began to flash, turning the chaos of the ballroom into a series of jagged, terrified photographs. "The exits are blocked!" someone screamed. Panic, ugly and immediate, infected the room. The mass of wealthy guests surged toward the main doors. Dario had Mara's hand in a tight, protective grip, but the sheer force of the crowd was a wave, tearing them apart. A heavy-set man stumbled, shoving Mara sideways, and Dario was swallowed by a sea of black tuxedos and screaming women. "Mara," she heard him roar, but he was gone. She was buffeted, pushed toward a service corridor, just as she found her footing. A hand clamped onto her upper arm like a steel trap. "If you want to live, come with me, now." It was a woman, not Elena Voss. This woman was dressed in the hotel's catering uniform, dark pants and a white shirt, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. Her eyes were a sharp, intelligent gray. "Who are you?" Mara tried to pull away. The woman did not let go. She yanked Mara bodily, dragging her through a door marked staff and into the sudden, jarring quiet of a stainless steel service elevator. The woman hit the button for the garage level, and the doors slid shut, muffling the alarms to a dull throb. "My name is Vega Quinn," the woman said, her voice low and fast. She was breathing normally, as if she were not in the middle of a stampede. "I'm with the Interstate Integrity Commission, undercover." "IIC," Mara breathed, the name Priya had mentioned. "Dario Valenzi is being framed tonight," Vega said, ignoring Mara's shock. "The video was a plant, but he's not clean. His top man, Arturo Bale, is dirty. He's been working with the Rook Syndicate, using Valenzi's own network to move their product. Tonight, Arturo is making his move to take over." The elevator hummed. Mara's world was tilting. "You're telling me this? Why?" "Because Arturo thinks you're Valenzi's new weakness, and the IAC needs to see the money trail. We can't touch Arturo until we can link him to the Rooks and the money." Vega dug into her pocket and pulled out something small, black, and metallic. It was a magnetic tag, no bigger than a fingernail. "I need you to plant this on Valenzi's car, his keys. If you can get them, it will verify the dirty money routes." "You want me to spy on him," Mara said flatly. "To betray him." "I want you to help us catch the real criminals," Vega countered, her eyes hard. "And we can help you." She pulled out a small data file. Mara Ellison, 26, significant student loan debt, and, oh, yes, $93,000 in outstanding medical bills from your mother's care at Greyhaven General. Mara's blood ran cold. How do you know that? It's my job to know. Vega held out the tag. We have a program, the Recovery Path Fund, a discretionary fund for witnesses. You help us, your debt vanishes. All of it, wiped clean. You can walk away from this city, from all of this. The elevator doors opened onto the concrete chill of the parking garage. The alarm was fainter here. Mara looked at the tag. She thought of the red-stamped envelopes. She thought of her mother, and she thought of Dario's hand on her neck, fastening her mother's charm. No, Mara said, shoving Vega's hand away. I'm not his Judas. Vega's face hardened, but she nodded, as if expecting this. Your choice. But you're in the game now, whether you like it or not. She pressed the tag into Mara's hand anyway. Keep it. Insurance. What's that supposed to mean? It means Arturo is hitting Pier 9 tonight. While this circus keeps Dario busy, he's going to empty the warehouses. When the fireworks flare up over the bay, you get as far away from Pier 9 as you can. It's not going to be safe. Vega stepped out of the elevator and vanished into the shadows of the garage. Mara stood alone for a long moment, the small, cold tag heavy in her palm. Her heart was a trapped bird. She walked out into the rows of silent, expensive cars. He was waiting. Dario Valenzi was leaning against his black sedan, exactly where she had left it. His tuxedo was impeccable, his hair untouched. He was an island of absolute calm in the chaos. He was not looking for her. He was waiting for her. She walked toward him, her steps echoing. She opened her hand, revealing the IIC tracking tag. His eyes dropped to her palm, then lifted to her face. He did not move. He did not yell. He did not accuse. His expression was one of deep, unreadable concentration. Good, he said, his voice quiet. Keep it. You can track me, as long as you also let me help you. Mara was breathless. You knew about the IIC about her. I knew there was a rat in the hotel. I did not know it was her. He pushed off the car. The children's fund is clean. Mara, every dollar, my mother's legacy. I would burn this city to the ground before I let it be tainted. The video was a fabrication, but it was sourced from an internal Valenzi server. He was close now, his gaze pinning her. Only 2 people besides me have access to that server. My lawyer, Elena Voss, and my peer manager, Arturo Bale. He had laid the cards on the table. He was offering her the truth she had come for. You have a choice. Right now, he said, his voice low, pulling her into a conspiracy of 2. You can take that tag, go back to your apartment, and try to forget this night, you can go back to your old life. Or you trust me. You come with me to a blind spot, a safe house in Rivet Row, the old shipyard district, a place where we can see who is really pulling the strings. But if you come, you are in all the way. Mara looked at the tag, then at the man who had protected her from a drone, who had spoken her mother tongue. Her old life was a mountain of debt and 20-hour days. This was terrifying, but it was real. I'll come, she said, but I have a condition. His eyebrow raised. No more lies, she said, her voice shaking but firm. Not to me. Not about anything that touches a person's life. I don't care about the boxes or the money. But you don't lie to me about people. Dario stared at her for a long, heavy second. He looked at the sky, then back at her. That will be the hardest thing you have asked of me, but I will try. He opened the car door. As Mara slid in, a burst of spectacular, colorful fireworks exploded over the harbor. The grand finale for the charity ball. The crowd, now being told the fire alarm was false, would be cheering. But as the greens and blues faded, another light shot up, this one from the direction of the docks. It was a single, violent streak of red, bursting high above the bay. The signal. Dario got in the car, his face grim. Arturo's moved, he said. He just lit the fuse. The sedan's engine turned over, a silent, powerful purr, and they drove, not away from the danger, but deeper into its heart. The safe house in Rivet Row was not a house. It was a cavernous, minimalist loft on the 4th floor of a defunct 19th century locomotive factory. The only light came from a bank of monitors and the moon, which illuminated the abandoned, rust-colored train tracks below. The place smelled of brick dust, ozone, and old iron. A man was hunched over the monitors, his face cast in a blue-green glow that, according to him, he could not properly see. This was Finch. He was thin, with a chaotic halo of red hair, and he wore a t-shirt that said, "Hugh is not my friend." "All right, boss," Finch chirped, his fingers a blur across 3 separate keyboards. "The video file from the charity event is a lovely piece of fiction. The metadata is scrubbed. The encryption is standard. But, Dario said, standing over his shoulder, a dark, motionless silhouette. "But the artist was sloppy," Finch said, grinning. "They compressed the video for broadcast, and in the final layer, they left this." He isolated a corner of the screen, running a filter. A faint, web-like pattern of pixels emerged. An invisible digital watermark, very, very high-end, and traceable to the security printer that services, drumroll, please, the law offices of one Elena Voss. Mara, who was standing by the cold window, turned. "Elena, but she's your lawyer." "A fact that did not escape me," Dario said, his voice dangerously neutral. "There's more," Finch said, the humor gone. "That red flare over the bay. It coincided with this." He brought up a new screen, a rapid, flowing cascade of data. "This is the main router at Pier 9. Someone is pulling the entire accounting ledger, not a copy, a pull. They're trying to empty the digital safe. They've routed it through 6 different countries, but the pipe is wide open. They're taking everything." "Cut the signal," Dario commanded. "Firewall the pier, now." "Wait," Mara said. Dario turned to her, his gaze intense. "Don't," she said, her voice finding a new, sudden strength. "Don't go silent. That's what they expect. Vega, the IIC, they think you're dirty. Arturo wants you to look guilty. If you just hide. You prove them right. You said it yourself. They want to make you the man who betrays children. Don't let them." "What do you suggest, Mara?" His voice was soft. "A test." "You let them steal," she said, thinking fast. "But you show them. You show everyone you said this city isn't kind to decent people. Show them what indecent really looks like." Dario stared at her, a long, analytical moment where he seemed to be recalculating her entire worth. A slow, almost imperceptible nod. He looked at Finch. "You heard her. Can you do it?" Finch's grin returned, wider this time. "Boss, I can make the city's public cameras sing Anonymous Stream, bounced off a satellite. Looks like it's coming from nowhere. Give me 90 seconds. Finch's fingers flew. On the largest monitor, a mosaic of grainy, black and white images appeared. Public cameras, traffic cams, a security feed from the harbor master's office. They all showed Pier 9. And they showed the rooks. In the midst of flashing and clearly fake fire engine lights, unmarked panel trucks were backing up to the warehouses. Men in dark gear were loading crates, not with the panic of a smash and grab, but with the efficiency of a planned evacuation. "We're live," Finch said, piggybacking on the local news servers. Anyone who checks the breaking news feed for Greyhaven just found us. They watched for 10 minutes, then on the screen, a new set of vehicles screamed onto the pier, black SUVs IIC. "Here we go," Mara whispered. But the raid was wrong. The IIC agents flooded the pier, but the panel trucks were already gone. The rooks had vanished. The IIC agents, moving with clumsy, uncoordinated energy, tackled a few straggling dockhands. It was theater. Arturo Bale was nowhere to be seen. Dario's phone, the one he kept separate, vibrated. He looked at the text. "It's from an unknown number," he said, his voice flat. "It just says, 'Don't trust anyone in a yellow vest tonight.'" "Vega," Mara said, "the IIC agents, some of them, they were wearing yellow vests." Dario's face was like carved stone. "The IIC is compromised, or she is." He looked at the watermark on the other screen. There is only one person who can answer these questions. We are going to see Elena. Now. Bring the watermark evidence, and Mara said, grabbing her jacket. Let's see how she reacts. Let's test her. The sedan cut through the back streets of Greyhaven, a black shark in a sea of urban decay. As they neared the financial district, a battered, dark blue pickup truck suddenly pulled out from an alley, blocking the entire street. Dario, Mara said, her hand on the dash. I see it. The truck's headlights flashed, high beams, blinding them. 2 more men stepped out from the alley, blocking any reverse. Dario did not hesitate. He cut the wheel hard to the right, his arm shooting out to brace Mara as the seatbelt locked. He jammed the accelerator to the floor. The sedan shot forward, not at the truck, but at the impossibly narrow loading alley between 2 brick buildings. It's too small, Mara yelled. It will fit. The side mirrors scraped against the brick, sending sparks and the shriek of tortured metal into the night. The car was a piston in a cylinder. Mara, her heart hammering against her ribs, fumbled for her phone. She hit the record app, her thumb shaking, and let it fall into the open well of her purse. They burst out of the alley onto the next street, the sedan's powerful engine roaring. Dario spun the wheel, the back end of the car drifting in a controlled, smoky slide. In the rearview mirror, they could see the men scrambling back to their truck, already left behind. They were at Elena's office tower, a monument of glass and steel, in less than 2 minutes. The lobby was empty, the marble reflecting only their tense figures. They got into the elevator. Dario pressed the button for the 30th floor, Elena's office. The doors closed, the elevator rose smoothly. Halfway up, with a sickening clunk and a groan of metal, it stopped. The lights went out, the emergency light flickered on, bathing them in a weak, sickly red. They cut the power, Dario said, his voice calm. He hit the emergency call button. Nothing. Finch, he said, pulling out his phone. He had a signal. We're in the elevator, between 20 and 21. Power is cut. Mara heard Finch's tinny, high-speed voice on the other end. Okay, boss standard procedure. Pop the service panel on the right. See a red wire and a yellow wire. Dario had the panel open. Yes. Great, ignore them, Finch said. This is an override. Look for the manual lock release. It's a cable. You'll need to pull it, but the door is pressure locked. You need to pry the inner door open at the same time. We have nothing to pry it with, Dario said. Mara, Dario said, looking at her, his face grim in the red light. Your hair. My bobby pin. She realized. She fumbled, pulling a thin black pin from her hair. And my shoelace, Dario said, kneeling. In seconds, he had unlaced his expensive dress shoe, retrieving a long, thin, impossibly strong lace. He gave the phone to Mara. Tell me what he says. For 2 minutes, guided by Finch's voice, Dario worked, his powerful hands suddenly precise and delicate. He threaded the shoelace around the cable, using the bobby pin to jimmy the edge of the inner door. It's not going to be gentle, Finch warned. Dario braced his feet. Now. He yanked the shoelace. Mara jammed the bobby pin. The lock released with a sound like a gunshot. The doors did not open. They sprang apart, revealing the hallway of the 21st floor. Elena Voss was standing there. She was not surprised. She was waiting. Her arms were crossed, her face a mask of profound, weary sadness, a mixture of pity and self-defense. She looked past Dario, her eyes landing directly on Mara, still holding the phone in her trembling hand. You should have stayed away from him, Mara, Elena said. Elena did not flinch as Dario stepped out of the broken elevator, his presence filling the sterile hallway. She simply nodded toward the dark conference room behind her. In here. They've already shut down the main systems. The room was vast, a glass-walled box that overlooked the glittering, uncaring lights of Greyhaven. The only illumination came from the city itself. The watermark, Dario said, his voice flat. He did not accuse. He stated. It wasn't me, Elena said, her voice tired. Of course it was my printer. He knew my security. The printer was cloned, the signal spoofed. Mara asked, stepping forward. Arturo, Elena said, her professional mask crumbling, revealing a bitter regret. He was my first major case, years ago. I got him acquitted on a technicality. I thought I had saved him. I brought him to Dario. I vouched for him. And he used that trust to get access to everything. My systems, Dario's. He's been planning this for months. She had not betrayed the fund. She had been betrayed. As she spoke, a new alarm began to sound. Not a fire drill, but a heavy, pulsating whoop, whoop, whoop. Red lights began to flash in the hallway, and a voice over the intercom announced, "Building lockdown initiated. Unidentified hostile entities on floor 21. Secure in place." He called in a threat, Dario said, his eyes scanning the exits. "To trap us." "This way," Elena said, urgency cutting through her regret. She led them to a heavy wooden door at the back of the conference room. "The old building archives. It's lead-lined. They won't find us on thermal." The room was small, cramped, and smelled of old paper and leather. Shelves of bound ledgers rose to the ceiling. A single emergency light glowed on the wall, casting a warm, steady, golden light. It was a pocket of silence while the alarms wailed outside. They heard the heavy thud of maglocks engaging, then footsteps, heavy boots running down the hallway, shouting. Mara pressed her back against a shelf, the adrenaline from the car chase and the elevator finally catching up. It hit her not as panic, but as a deep, bone-shaking tremor. Her hands, which had been so steady, began to shake. Dario saw it. He moved in front of her, blocking the door, blocking the world. He put his hands on her shoulders, his grip firm, grounding. "Hey," he said, his voice low, pulling her focus from the noise outside. "Look at me. Breathe with me." He took an exaggeratedly slow breath, in through his nose, out through his mouth. Mara's eyes were locked on his. She tried to follow, but her breath hitched, a half-sob of pure exhaustion and terror. "Again," he commanded, his voice softer. He took another breath, and this time, she matched him. The shouting outside faded. The alarm became a dull pulse. There was only the small, warm, golden room and the man in front of her. The adrenaline had nowhere to go, and it left a cold, trembling void. Dario's expression softened. The hard edges of the boss, the leader, dissipated, leaving something raw and intensely present. He lifted a hand, not to her shoulder, but to her face. He cupped her jaw, his thumb stroking the bone. Then he moved his hand to the back of her neck, his fingers threading into her hair. He gently pulled her forward until his forehead rested against hers. "Stay con me," he whispered, the Italian a soft, rough caress. "Stay with me." His other hand came up to her waist, pulling her closer, not with force, but with an invitation. His palm was broad and warm against the small of her back. The thumb on his other hand began to trace a slow, soothing pattern just behind her ear, on the sensitive skin of her neck. Mara let out the breath she had been holding since she dropped the wine tray. All the defenses she had built, the exhaustion, the debt, the fear, they crumbled. She was not just tired, she was empty. She filled that emptiness with him. Her hands, no longer shaking, came up and slid around his back, her fingers splaying against the fine wool of his jacket, feeling the solid, powerful muscles beneath. She burrowed her face into the space between his neck and shoulder, inhaling the scent of him, clean wool, starch, and that faint metallic tang of the harbor. His arms tightened, enfolding her completely. They stood like that for a full minute, breathing each other's air, a silent, unmoving anchor in a storm. His heart beat steadily beneath her ear, a counter-rhythm to the chaos. He pulled back, just enough to see her face, his eyes, dark in the golden light. Searched hers. It was a question, asked in perfect silence. "May I?" Mara gave her answer just as silently. She rose on her toes, a tiny, fractional movement, and met him. The kiss was not what she expected. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of an action movie. It was slow, it was deep, it was a promise. His lips were firm but surprisingly soft as they moved against hers, a deliberate exploration that held no demand, only a profound, grounding comfort. Her own lips parted under his, and the kiss deepened, a slow, warm tide that washed away the last of the fear. Her shoulders, which had been up around her ears for days, finally relaxed, melting into his hold. It was a kiss that said, "I see you. You are here. You are safe." He was the first to pull away, but he did not go far. He rested his forehead against hers again, his eyes closed. Mara kept her hands on his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. They were quiet, letting the moment settle, a fragile, new reality. There was no rush to go further, no need to define what had not even been spoken. It was enough to be held, to be seen, to be safe. A click and a hiss from the hallway, followed by the intercom. "Lockdown disengaged. All clear." The moment was broken. They stepped apart, the air between them still charged. Mara smoothed the front of her dress, her fingers brushing the chain of her mother's charm. Dario's eyes followed the movement. He reached out and gently, with one finger, touched the small coin at her throat. A rare, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. "It's still here," he said. "Like you." "Dario!" Elena's voice came from the conference room. She had given them their space. "Now, we act." They joined her. The main lights were back on. Elena slid a small, silver hard drive across the polished table. "Arturo's Black Raven plan," she said. "Everything. The Rook Syndicate contracts, the offshore accounts, his partner on the city council. He's been building a ghost ledger to frame you and take over the consortium, using the Rook's violence as his muscle." "He's in the wind," Dario said, picking up the drive. "He'll be halfway to a non-extradition country by morning." "Not if he thinks he has a loose end," Mara said, her voice clear and hard. Dario and Elena both looked at her. "Me," Mara continued, her mind racing, the fog of fear replaced with a sharp, cold clarity. "I was at the party. I was with you, and—" She pulled the small, black IIC tag from her pocket. "I have this. The tracker Vega gave me." She looked at Dario. "He thinks I'm your weakness. Let's make him believe it. I contact him through an anonymous channel. I tell him I'm terrified, that I want out. I tell him I want to sell this. Proof that the IIC is watching you. I'll exchange this tracker for safe passage and money." "No," Dario said. It was immediate. Absolute. "You'd be bait. He would kill you." "Not if we pick the spot," Mara insisted, walking to the window. "Not Mercer Wharf, the old historical pier. It's wide open. It's covered in public security cameras. He'll feel safe because he can see me coming. And we'll be safe because he can't try anything without the entire city watching." It took Finch less than 10 minutes to find a disposable, untraceable number that Arturo would answer. Mara sat in the Rivet Row loft, a borrowed earpiece in one ear, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She practiced the words, the tone. She had to sound like the victim she was supposed to be. She made the call. "I want to talk to Arturo Bale." "Who is this?" The voice was a rough gravel. "The Waitress," Mara said, injecting a bitter, shaking fury into her voice. "The one he dragged to that party. I'm done. I'm out. Dario Valenzi is insane, and this city is trying to kill me." A pause, then a low chuckle. "So you're running. What do you want from me?" "I have something the IIC gave me," Amara said, letting her voice crack just enough. "A tracker. They wanted me to put it on his car. I want to sell it. To you. Proof. I just want money, and I want you to guarantee I can get out of Greyhaven safely." She heard him breathing, calculating. "He's letting you walk around." "He thinks I trust him. He's a fool." Arturo bit. "Mercer Wharf. At low tide, that's 2 a.m. Come alone. You see a cop, you see anyone. I'm gone. And you're left holding the bag for Valenzi. Just you." "I'll be there," Mara said, and hung up. "He is coming alone. Mara relayed to the room. No, he is not, Dario said, his voice absolute. He was checking the magazine of a handgun, the metallic sha click sounding unnaturally loud in the loft. He will have a sniper. He will have a team. This is not a negotiation. It is an execution. You are not going. Yes, I am, Mara said, standing. She walked over to him, forcing him to look up from the weapon. You told me you needed a mirror, someone to reflect the truth. Now you need to be the one to trust. She was close enough to see the exhaustion and the raw fear for her in his eyes. You trusted me in that elevator. Now trust me in the fog. Vega will be there. Crane Bay 3. She'll have eyes on us. She is IIC. She is not our friend, Dario argued, his voice low and guttural. She will let him shoot you if it means getting her case. Then you be there, too, Mara challenged. But I am the one walking onto that pier. He's expecting a terrified girl. That is the only way this works. He stared at her, his jaw working. The muscle in his cheek ticked. He finally stood, towering over her. He was waging a war with every instinct in his body, the instinct to protect, to lock her in this room, to go himself. And he was losing to her logic. He nodded, a single, sharp, agonizing gesture. He reached out, his fingers brushing the silver charm at her neck. This, if you are in danger, if the deal changes, if you even think he is going to move, you touch this. His eyes were locked on hers, burning with intensity. Just brush your fingers against it. That is the signal. The moment you touch it, the plan is over and I am coming. Do you understand? I understand, she whispered. Mercer Wharf was a skeleton. The fog rolling off the harbor was so thick it was like walking through wet cotton. It muffled all sound, amplifying the creak. Creak. Creak of her heels on the ancient damp wooden planks. The tide was out and the air smelled of low tide, of salt, mud, and a century of decay. She clutched the small, black IIC tracker in her pocket. Her hands were shaking. That, at least, was not an act. You came. Arturo Bale stepped out from behind a stack of rotted lobster pots, his shape a thick shadow in the mist. He was not smiling, not a real smile. It was a contortion of his face, a mask of triumph. The little waitress, he said, stepping closer. He was still 10 feet away. Smart. Got smart. Did you realize you were swimming with a shark that was already bleeding? I just want to leave, Mara said, her voice a thin, reedy thing. She held out the tracker. Here is the tag. I want the money and the ride you promised. Arturo laughed, a short, barking sound. He stepped forward and snatched the tag from her hand. He examined it, turning it over in his thick fingers. This is it. This is what the IAC thinks is high tech. He tossed it in the air and caught it. He was overconfident, sloppy, reveling in his own perceived genius. It doesn't matter if it works, Mara said. It matters that they gave it to me. They are watching him. Oh, they are. Arturo agreed, his voice dripping with false sincerity. But they are watching the wrong man. He tucked the tag into his pocket, his arrogance making him talkative. This whole time, they have been looking at Dario, and tonight, I give them the monster they have been hunting. When I am done, when I have emptied Pier 9 and the rooks are gone, every last missing dollar will point straight back to the Valenci Consortium. He was boasting, puffing himself up. Greyhaven will call him the devil, the man who stole from sick children, and I will just be the poor, loyal manager who tried to stop him. It is a perfect story. As he spoke, Mara saw it. Over his shoulder, out on the dark, restless water, a tiny pinpoint of red light appeared. It swept across a piling, across a rusted cleat. It was hunting. A sniper, just as Dario had predicted. In her ear, Vega's voice was a sudden, sharp whisper. Sniper. Rook tactical. It is a double cross. Mara, they are not letting you leave. Get down. But the red dot was already on her chest. Mara's hand flew to her neck, her fingers closing over the charm. It happened faster than she could breathe. A sound like the air ripping apart, a massive, dark shape materialized from the fog-shrouded shadow of a beach trawler. Dario. He moved not like a man, but like a force, his body slamming into hers, a solid wall of muscle and tuxedo. He did not just push her, he threw them both, using his weight to carry them down. Thwack-zing! The bullet hit the exact spot where she had been standing, splintering the thick wooden pillar, sending a spray of sharp, salt-preserved wood shards into the air. Dario had her on the ground, his entire body covering hers, his hand clamped over the back of her head, forcing her face into the rough wool of his jacket. "Stay down," he breathed, his voice a low vibration against her cheek. He raised his free hand, making a single, sharp gesture to the darkness, and the world went black. Finch hit the switch. Every light on Mercer Wharf, the high-intensity sodium lamps, the safety lights, the strings of ancient bulbs died instantly. They were plunged into a profound, disorienting darkness, lit only by the faint, diffused glow of the city far behind them. "What? What the hell?" Arturo yelled, his voice suddenly high, panicked. And in that darkness, as Arturo was blinded, Elena Voss made her move. Activating the emergency broadcast, she spoke from the loft, her voice calm. She hit the key. Every television station, every major news blog, every emergency service scanner in Greyhaven suddenly received a priority packet. It was the audio from Mara's phone, the crystal-clear recording of Arturo's confession. Greyhaven will call him the devil, the man who stole from sick children. It played over a video feed Finch had pulled from the docks 2 nights prior, Arturo Bale, in grainy night vision, shaking hands with the rooks and accepting a heavy silver briefcase. The sirens started then, not distant, close. The real IIC, the ones Vega had scrambled, were on their way. Arturo heard them. He snapped, he lunged in the darkness, grabbing, his hand finding Mara's arm. He hauled her up, yanking her from beneath Dario. "No!" Mara screamed. Arturo clicked on a powerful flashlight, blinding them, and Mara saw he had a gun, pressed hard against her temple. He was using her as a human shield. "Get back, Valenzi," he shrieked, "or I swear I will put a bullet in her head. Drop your weapon, drop it now." Dario was on one knee, his own gun leveled, his face, caught in the harsh beam of Arturo's light, was a mask of cold, unadulterated murder. He looked at Arturo. He looked at Mara. Her eyes were wide, terrified, but she was looking only at him. Dario exhaled. He slowly, deliberately, placed his handgun on the wet planks of the pier. He pushed it away. Then he stood, raising both hands, palms out in the blinding white light, a target. "You want me?" "Arturo," Dario said, his voice calm, an anchor in the chaos. "She is nothing, a waitress. Let her go. Take me instead." The standoff stretched for a single, agonizing heartbeat. Dario, hands raised, a perfect target. Arturo, sweating, his hand shaking, the gun pressed hard enough to leave a mark on Mara's temple. "Arturo," a voice from above, Vega. From the darkness of the crane gantry overhead, something fell. It was not a bullet. It was a weighted, bundled mass of high-tensile wire mesh, a capture net. It dropped with a heavy, metallic hiss, unfurling in midair. It landed perfectly, enveloping Arturo's shoulders and head. He roared in surprise, his arms pinned, the flashlight beam went wild, and his fingers spasmed on the trigger. The gun went off. The shot was deafening, but it fired upward, uselessly into the crane housing. In that split second of confusion, Dario moved. He was not a man offering surrender. He was a predator who had been waiting for the trap to spring. He lunged, closing the 10-foot gap in a single bound, his arm wrapping around Mara's waist like a steel band. He ripped her from Arturo's grasp, spinning them both backward, putting his body between her and the struggling, netted man. Another shot, a second gunman, one of the rooks, hidden in the shadows, fired at Dario. The bullet struck the wooden planks an inch from Dario's foot. A spray of wood, sharp as shrapnel, exploded upward. Dario grunted, shielding Mara as the splinters tore at his outstretched hand, but he did not stop moving. He half dragged, half carried her into the relative safety of a stack of shipping containers. "Vega," he roared, "light him up!" Vega dropped from the gantry, landing like a cat, her own weapon drawn, as two other IIC agents swarmed the pier, pinning the struggling, cursing Arturo to the deck. "You fools!" Arturo screamed, his voice muffled by the net as they cuffed him. He was laughing, a high, unhinged sound. "You have no idea you think you got me. You don't even know who's running the IIC in Greyhaven. You're just puppets." Vega, who had been moving to secure him, froze. Her face, caught in the beam of a fresh flashlight, was pale. He had confirmed her worst fear. That hesitation was all they needed. A new sound, the roar of a heavy engine. A black SUV, its headlights off, rocketed onto the pier from the landward side, tires squealing on the wet wood. It slammed to a stop. 4 men, all in black tactical gear with the same yellow IIC vests, jumped out, but they were not looking at Arturo. They were looking at Dario and Vega. "Fake," Vega shouted, just as Elena Voss, who had emerged from the shadows, shoved Mara hard. "Behind the container, stay down." A firefight erupted. It was not a battle. It was a chaotic, close-quarters explosion of noise and confusion. The air filled with the sharp crack, crack, crack of gunfire. Elena crouched with Mara, her face grim. Dario was in front of them, a living shield. He had retrieved his gun, but he was not firing. He was watching, protecting their exit. A burst of automatic fire from one of the fake agents ripped into the metal side of the container they were hiding behind. A cloud of rust, paint, and fine shredded wood dust rained down on them. Mara cried out, burying her face in her knees. Dario put a hand on her shoulder, his grip unbreakable. He was still bleeding from the splinters in his hand. "Focus on my voice. Mara," he commanded, his voice perfectly even. A calm, low anchor in the storm. "Do not look. Just listen to me. They are bad shots. They are panicking." From the loft, Finch's voice screamed over their comms, which were still active. "I got him. Boss Crane 16. A tremendous groan of stressed metal filled the air. High above, the massive harbor crane, which Finch had hacked, lurched to life. It swung its huge magnetic claw and, with impossible precision, dropped a 20-ton shipping container directly in the path of the black SUV, blocking any escape. Vega, using the distraction, moved with brutal efficiency. She took down one fake agent with a shot to the leg and another with a crippling blow to the throat. The remaining two, seeing their exit blocked and hearing the new, louder wail of approaching sirens, real city police, this time dropped their weapons and raised their hands. It was over in less than 30 seconds. But in the chaos, Arturo had been forgotten. "He's gone," Vega yelled, running to the edge of the pier. Mara, peering from behind the container, saw it. Arturo, having slipped his cuffs in the fight, was jumping down into a small, black motorboat that had been hidden under the pier. He hit the ignition, and the engine roared to life. Dario was on his feet instantly. His face was a mask of cold fury. He ran to the edge, his gun up, ready to pursue. He would not let him escape. "Dario, no!" Mara screamed, running out from cover. He stopped, turning to her, his expression demanding why she would stop him. "Don't," she said, grabbing his arm, his sleeve wet with blood from his hand. "Look," she pointed up, at one of the still active public cameras that Finch had not cut. "The broadcast, it's still live. The whole city is watching." He stared at her, the predator in his eyes warring with the strategist. "Let them see," she pleaded, her voice raw. "Let them see you choose. Are you the man who hunts his enemies, or the man who saves the people who trusted him? Let Greyhaven see you save people, not hunt." He looked at the escaping boat. He looked at Vega, who was struggling with one of the fake, wounded agents. He looked at the flashing red lights of the city police, just arriving. He let out a single, harsh breath. The hand holding the gun relaxed. He lowered it, then holstered it. He turned his back on Arturo's escape and walked over to Vega. Pulling a set of zip ties from her belt, he began, with his one good hand, to secure the fake IIC agents for the arriving police. Elena, seeing his choice, was already on her phone, her voice sharp and cutting. "Get me the Atlantic Regional Inspector General, now. I am Elena Voss, counsel for the Valenzi Consortium, and I am reporting a compromised IIC field office and a direct attack by men wearing unauthorized federal badges. I am sending you the live feed. You have an internal insurrection." The online narrative, which had been poised to crucify him, pivoted in an instant. The story was no longer Valenzi caught in criminal scheme. It was Valenzi, hostage rescued, aids IIC in stopping rogue agents. Dario walked back to Mara as the first uniformed officers flooded the pier. He looked down at his bleeding hand, then at her. His gaze was heavy, analytic, and something new. "You," he said, his voice low, almost an accusation, "are changing the way I choose my battles." The dawn broke over Greyhaven with a cold, gray clarity, and the city's whispers had turned into a digital roar. The morning news was not just reporting a story, it was reacting to a detonation. Arturo's confession, broadcast live and now looping endlessly, was the only thing anyone was talking about. The stock prices of several obscure, harbor-adjacent shell companies had nosedived at the opening bell. The city council, in a frantic attempt to get ahead of the scandal, had called an emergency public hearing for the following day. They were gathered in Elena's pristine, glass-walled office, the city below them already a hive of accusation. Vega Quinn was there, not as an undercover agent but as a federal officer, her face grim. "Arturo's confession has turned the whole underworld upside down," Vega stated, pacing. "But the real target is still in the shadows. My superiors at the Atlantic Inspector General's office are furious. The man who signed off on those yellow vests, the man who authorized the fake raid to let the rooks escape, was our own deputy director at the Greyhaven field office, Nolan Creed." "The councilman's partner?" Elena said, looking at her notes. "And Arturo's," Vega added. "Creed's the one who's been providing IIC cover for the rooks, using Arturo to muscle Valenzi out. He'll be at the hearing tomorrow, sitting in the front row, pretending to be the picture of federal integrity. We need to expose him, publicly." "And what of my reputation?" Dario asked, his voice quiet. He was standing by the window, his hand professionally bandaged. The blood had been cleaned from his suit. "Half the city still believes I'm the one who stole from the Children's Fund." "We counter with radical transparency," Elena said, her lawyer's mind already 3 steps ahead. "The rumor is you're laundering money, so we show them the money. All of it. I'm drafting a motion to transfer every cent from the Greyhaven Children's Relief Fund into a publicly viewable, community-supervised escrow account. We will invite auditors from every news station in the state. We'll show them clean money, and we'll dare them to find a single dirty dollar." Dario nodded. "Do it, publicly." "That leaves you, Mara," Vega said, turning. "The council wants a star witness, the hostage. Nolan Creed will try to discredit you, paint you as Valenzi's lover, a puppet. You need to be unshakable." "I'll need to prepare," Mara said, her voice steady. "With my friend, Priya." She spent the afternoon at the Anchor and Almonds, the cafe closed to the public. Priya listened, her eyes wide, as Mara sketched out the truth. They worked on the testimony, not as a legal document, but as a story. Mara's story. She would talk about her mother, the nurse. She would talk about the crippling cost of a broken system. And she would talk about the choice she made on the pier to trust a man who, in the middle of chaos, had shown her a strange, violent, and unshakable form of principle. Dario sent the sedan for her at dusk, not to a mansion, but back to the loft in Rivet Row. The safe house felt different. It was no longer a military staging ground. It was quiet. The monitors were dark. Finch was gone. It was just them. "I am not a good host," Dario said, gesturing to the empty industrial kitchen. But Finch stocked the pantry. He found a box of spaghetti, a jar of sauce, and a forgotten wedge of hard cheese, Mara, her hands still aching from gripping her phone, found 2 plates. They did not talk about the hearing or the Waroks or Nolan Creed. Instead, he boiled water, and she found a knife to grate the cheese. They ate sitting on the simple, modern sofa, the plates balanced on their knees, overlooking the silent, rusted train tracks. "You're good with a bobby pin," he said, the corner of his mouth lifting. "And you're a terrible shoelace," she countered, a real, small laugh escaping her. "You broke it." The silence that followed was warm, companionable. It was the first normal, human moment she had felt in days. He put his plate aside. "When I was a boy," he said, his voice so quiet she had to lean in. "Before all this, I used to run away from the group homes. I'd come here, to the yards. I'd watch the ships. There was an old sailor, a Greek man, who fixed nets. He told me, it doesn't matter how the wind blows, it only matters how you stand. He taught me how to stand straight in a storm." Mara looked at his hands, the one bandaged, the other resting on his knee. He was all hard lines and sharp edges, a man built by storms. She reached out, her fingers hesitant, and laid her hand on his. It was a simple, small gesture, but it felt enormous. His hand was warm, his skin calloused. "You don't need a storm to prove you're standing, Dario," she said softly. He turned his hand over, his fingers lacing with hers. He looked at their joined hands, then at her face, his gaze searching, vulnerable in a way that shattered her. "I don't know," he whispered, "how to be anything else." He leaned in, and this kiss was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled comfort of the archive room. This was slow. It was certain. It was a question and an answer all at once. His lips were tentative, respectful, moving against hers with a tenderness that made her heart ache. He pulled her closer, and she went, sliding onto the cushion next to him, her other hand coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart. Thump, 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 a strong, steady rhythm beneath her palm. He tasted of pasta and a faint, residual bitterness, like dark coffee. He breathed her in, his forehead pressing against hers, his hands holding her face as if she were something fragile. "Mara," he whispered, her name a prayer. There were no more words, just the quiet intimacy, the feel of his thumb stroking her jaw, the solid presence of him. They were 2 people in a dark room, with the wreckage of their city outside, finding a single point of stillness. When they finally pulled apart, the air was different. A line had been crossed. "We need rules," she said, her voice a little breathless, her hand still on his chest. "Rules," he agreed, his voice rough. "No innocents," she said, her eyes locking with his. "No children, no staff, no Priyas. Their lives are not currency. And the children's fund, it stays clean, no matter what." "I agree," he said, without hesitation. "If you break those rules," she said, her voice hard, "if you become the man they say you are, I leave." "And if I break them," he said, his gaze unflinching, "you should." A fragile, powerful pact was sealed. Her phone, on the table, vibrated, a text from an unknown number. "Testifying is a bad idea. We know where your friend Priya works. Tell the little baker to watch out for a gas leak." Mara's blood turned to ice, a threat, a dirty, cowardly threat, aimed at the one innocent person she had. She showed him the phone. Dario read the text, and the warmth, the vulnerability, vanished. It was instantaneous. The man who had been whispering her name was gone, replaced by the leader of the Valenzi consortium. He did not rage. He did not swear. He simply stood, took out his own phone, and made a call. "Finch," he said, his voice flat, cold steel. "Priya Sharma, Anchor and Almonds. I want a gas main emergency on her street. I want a 4-man team there in 20 minutes, disguised as city utility workers. Full, round-the-clock surveillance. The girl does not leave their sight. Go." He hung up, and he looked at Mara, his face hard but his eyes full of a grim apology. "This is the other side of it," he said. Mara nodded, her stomach churning. She understood. To be safe with him, he had to use the very power that made him dangerous. To love a man like Dario Valenzi, she had to accept both the softness of his kiss and the hardness of his protection. The Greyhaven City Hall chambers were not just full, they were suffocating. Every seat was taken, and the overflow crowd pressed against the back walls, a mass of reporters, dock workers, and the city's elite, all breathing the same stale, anxious air. Live television cameras, like glassy-eyed insects, were perched on platforms, broadcasting the city's judgment. At the front, the city council president banged his gavel. In the front row of the observation gallery, Nolan Creed, the deputy director of the IIC, sat with his hands steepled, his face a mask of cold, federal indifference. "I call Mara Ellison," the president said. Mara walked to the podium. She wore a simple, severe gray suit Elena had provided. She found Dario in the front row, his face unreadable. Then she looked at the cameras, and she spoke. She started with the spilled wine at La Pietra. She spoke of the exhaustion, the long hours. She described the red flare over the harbor, the signal that cut through the charity fireworks. She detailed the live video feed she had watched from the loft, the one Finch had broadcast, showing the rooks emptying Pier 9 while the IIC staged a fake raid. "They told me," Mara said, her voice clear and carrying, "that Mr. Valenzi was the monster. They told me to help them trap him." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small, black IIC tracker. She held it up for the cameras. "This was given to me by an IIC agent. I was told to plant it on him, to betray him. In exchange, they offered to erase my mother's medical debt." A gasp rippled through the room. "I was told to betray," Mara said, her voice shaking but defiant. "I chose not to." She was not coerced. Elena Voss's voice cut through the murmurs. As she took the next podium, she laid out the legal framework for the new, transparent escrow account for the Children's Relief Fund. Every dollar open to public audit, starting this afternoon. Then, Finch appeared on the video screen, patched in remotely. He presented the data. "The smear video," Finch's voice echoed, "was sophisticated, but they left a fingerprint." He displayed the invisible watermark. He showed the data path. It was cloned, yes, but the source, the authorization for the cloned printer, came from an internal IIC security server, right here in Greyhaven, specifically from the terminal of Deputy Director Nolan Creed. The room exploded. Creed shot to his feet. "This is a fabrication," Creed shouted, his voice booming with authority. "This is a circus, a media trial orchestrated by a known criminal." "Is it director?" A new voice. Vega Quinn, in a sharp federal uniform, stepped into the chamber from a side door. "I am Special Agent Vega Quinn, Inspector General's Task Force." She held up a warrant. "And I have a recording, authorized by the Atlantic IG, from 1 hour ago. A call you made, Director Creed, to an unsecured line, attempting to organize safe passage out of the city for a fugitive." She pressed play on a handheld device, holding it to the microphone. Nolan Creed's voice filled the room, panicked and raw. "Get Arturo to the sea route. I do not care how. Just get him out of the city before he talks." Creed's face went white. He looked wildly at two men in dark suits near the exit, his security. "Get me out of here," he hissed. The two men stood, but they were immediately blocked. The Greyhaven City Police, who'd been waiting in the wings, stepped in, their hands on their weapons. The fake agent's hands went up. The net had closed. The chamber doors burst open. The noise from the hall was deafening. "We have him!" Two uniformed officers were dragging a wet, snarling Arturo Bale into the hall. He had been captured at a shipyard, trying to repair the outboard motor on his stolen boat. He saw Dario, who was standing, moving to help Mara step down from the witness podium. Arturo lunged against his restraints, his face a mask of primal hatred. "Greyhaven will never be yours. Valenzi, you hear me? Never." Dario did not even look at him. He offered his hand to Mara. It was then that the shot came. A lone rook gunman, hidden in the press-only side entrance, had pulled a weapon. He fired, not at Arturo, but at the man he represented, at Valenzi. Dara's reaction was not a thought. It was an instinct. He grabbed Mara, spinning her, his back to the gunman, enveloping her in his arms as the bullet tore through the air. He grunted a sharp exhalation of breath. The bullet had grazed his shoulder. A deep, burning slice. Blood, dark and immediate, blossomed on his white shirt. Mara screamed, muffled against his chest. She stumbled back as he leaned. She caught him. Her hands, which had been shaking at the podium, now strangely steady. Dario. Police swarmed the gunman, tackling him to the floor. The room was pandemonium. Mara held Dario, pressing her hand hard against the wound, the blood hot and wet on her palm. He looked at her, his face pale, his eyes unfocused. "Stay with me," she commanded, her voice fierce, right by his ear amidst the screaming. "Look at me. Stay with me." Nolan Creed was being cuffed, his rights read in a loud monotone. The council president was banging the gavel, declaring a full investigation into the Rook Syndicate, an immediate suspension of all Pier 9 contracts, and full protective custody for the witnesses. Outside, the chaos of the city hall faded. A light, cold rain had begun to fall, washing the grime from the city air. Dario, his arm in a temporary sling, a bandage stark white against his dark suit, leaned against a marble balustrade. The press had been held back. Mara stood in front of him, blocking the wind. Her eyes were wet, from rain or relief. She did not know. He looked at her, the pain and the adrenaline creating a strange, quiet clarity in his eyes. He reached up with his good hand, touching her face. "Say that again," he said, his voice slow, rough, just as he had in the restaurant, a lifetime ago. Slowly. Mara smiled, a real, trembling smile. She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. She whispered, not a curse this time, but a vow, in her grandmother's Italian. "Resto, Conte." He pulled her in, and they kissed, there in the rain. It was not a kiss for the cameras. It was a quiet, desperate, and final sealing of a pact. A news helicopter, filming the aftermath, caught only the silhouette of a black umbrella, shielding two figures. Beneath it, unseen, their hands found each other. His good, his bad, her small, her steady, their fingers locked, a chain of decisions, a final unbreakable link. In the aftermath, the Greyhaven Children's Fund was secured, its escrow account a new standard for the city. Pier 9 was placed under independent oversight, and Vega Quinn, newly promoted, led the task force that would dismantle the Rooks and scrub the IIC clean. The Valenzi Consortium was still scrutinized, but the narrative had changed. And Dario Valenzi, for the first time, had shown Greyhaven that he could be wounded, that he could be soft, without ever being weak. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment below and let us know where you are listening from. We would love to connect and share thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.